On June 18th, 2007, it was reported that 5 unrelated men had all fallen prey to the same scheme. The president of the Long Island Jane Center ingratiated herself to them and soon convinced each of them to make a questionable real estate investment, which she subsequently sabotaged, leaving them with mountains of debt. The woman at the heart of this network of foreclosures responded by blaming her associates for their own misfortune. "They're scared and they're in trouble," she said. "It was a business, nothing personal." Some 4,000 miles away on the French Riviera, Al Gore prepared to address the Cannes Lions International Advertising Festival to discuss the threat posed by climate change. This is What a Year. Welcome to What a Year, the show where we pick a year and spend 10 episodes assembling a time capsule of movies, music, and other cultural odds and ends. I'm Ethan Warren.
And I'm Ryan Pollie.
And this week we are talking about our 6th contributions to the 2007 time capsule, Animal Collective's Strawberry Jam and Julie Taymor's Across the Universe. Plus, I will test Ryan's knowledge on another of the most significant cultural events of 2007. And then at the end, I'll be talking to the poet and essayist Hannah Bonner, who is contributing the poetry collection Something Bright Then Holes to the time capsule. So, let's get into it.
What did you like the record?
Did I like Animal Collective's Strawberry Jam?
It's a harsh, like abrasive record.
Well, it's not as harsh and abrasive as I necessarily expected it to be or remembered it as being. My relationship with Animal Collective has always been a little bit like when your buddy has another really close friend who like went to a different high school and like you're happy for them, but like you've never really figured it out. That's me and Animal Collective and like my friendship with you. So like I really like I've always wanted to kind of figure out how to breach the wall of like this very heady music that doesn't have a lot of like hooks and doesn't have conventional pop.
Yeah. I mean, trappings. At the time it felt like it being into like rave music or something. And then like, it's like, if somebody wanted to come with you to a rave, they'd be like, "Oh, I'm into that too. Let's do it." Like it was very big and loud and kind of weird. So it was never something that I probably would have forced on you as much as maybe some of these other bands.
Except that I went to a concert with you when I wasn't really a fan. Which was you more invited than forced me, and that's a real distinction there.
And that was the Merriweather tour.
That was the Merriweather tour. So yeah. I liked this record. I liked the first half a lot. The second half started feeling a lot like Dark Side of the Moon to me a little bit, and except for Winter Wonderland, which I think is a bop, I fell off a little bit. And it was fascinating to listen to in the context of Person Pitch. So
yeah. Did you hear on Strawberry Jam, it feels like there's a couple Noah songs?
The last track, whichever, is that Derek?
Yeah. About the dog? Yeah. They just feel very Person Pitch, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. It feels like you've stepped from one room in the house to the other.
But that's what's cool is I feel like Strawberry Jam is like, yeah, like the way that their voices come through, it plays definitely more as a Dave A.V. Tare, who's like the other singer. It plays way more as his record. It almost in the same way as like it could be said like I feel like that's the A.V. record and Person Pitch is the Noah record, and then the next one, Merriweather, is the coming together of both of these sounds. And I think Strawberry Jam, I mean, Noah's definitely playing in the band and he's on it and he's writing, but it just feels like Dave, the other singer's voice and songwriting voice is way more prominent. Did you hear that as like a thematic thing through the album?
Well, I didn't necessarily know. I mean, is it just like that if one of them is singing it, they wrote the song? Like, is that how or are they writing for each other?
I don't know. Great question.
Because it's definitely like the way that the songs are written on this is very different. I just have Forever in Green or For Reverend Green stuck in my head, that like droning loop now as we're talking about it. And that is something you wouldn't hear on Person Pitch. He's doing wordplay and he's messing with your head and it's very, very clear what he is or maybe isn't saying. Is that a reference to something this
Reverend Green,
this sound-alike phrase that "forever in green" sounds like "for Reverend Green," which is what I think he's playing with there. And I don't know if that's some like commonly understood to be.
I'm sure there's a word for it, like a literary term for it, but
like if you say olive juice, it looks to someone reading your lips like you've said, "I love you."
I love you.
Yes, something like that.
Yeah. Or I want to vacuum.
What is?
Looks like I want to beep you.
Thank you for censoring that. It's important. That was the one cuss we were ever going to have.
I think that would have sounded too vulgar if I did it.
That's true.
That would have been over the line.
It's unbecoming. It's unseemly.
Parental advisory sticker on our podcast.
So would you like to tell me a little about your history with this record? Because I want to hear it from your eyes. Hear it from your eyes.
This is when I got into this band, was this record. So this was the first thing I understood them to be, kind of. And it was through this guy, Peter, who went to our school and kind of took me under his wing. And he was super into like Modest Mouse and Pavement and like cool music, cool like college rock, like like stuff that I didn't really know. And I was coming out of high school having listened to a lot of most recently like classic rock or rap, and so this new like modern stuff, like I didn't know Grizzly Bear until this time in my life, or Vampire Weekend was coming out, Fleet Foxes was coming out, they came out like my senior year of high school maybe. But this record sounded like none of that stuff. It was just like I saw it live very early on, and hearing it with this guy Peter, who took me to see them in Boston, and it was like one of the craziest things I'd ever seen, because it was really, 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 really loud in a way that I'd never heard music before, but it was electronic, and it was like huge sub basses and like pulsating, and the room's just like shaking, but it was also like awesome in like the traditional sense of that word, and like beautiful, and just like my jaw was on the floor. And so got so into this record, like it's, a huge record for me. Listen to it a lot, and I know a lot of these weird words on it. And just, I think that the songwriting is incredible. And it's a raw rock record at the same time, as electronic as it is. It like also feels, especially in context with Merriweather and Fall Be Kind, it feels more organic and raw. I mean, all of their projects seem to straddle that line, right, between like what is human and what sounds like, that synthesizer that's a machine, let's make it sound bodily, or like that, let's make our human noises sound like a machine. Like they're just always kind of like messing around with that area and that gray area of like experimentation. And Strawberry Jam, though, I feel like has that raw rock energy to it, which I really, really like. I think they kind of calm down from here. So like this is back when he was like screaming a lot, and Dave just kind of felt like the lead singer. I remember when I first like got into them, he was kind of like the lead guy because he was singing all the Strawberry Jam songs. And then Person Pitch came out, and that was mind blowing because it was like, oh, that's the dude who sang those two songs on Strawberry Jam. Like, and like, I guess you knew his voice from Animal Collective, but I feel like Noah's songwriting voice really flourished this year. And yeah, I think they're one of the best bands of all time. I really do. I think they're one of the best bands. One of my favorites, certainly. Let's go in the time capsule. You want to say anything else?
I mean, do you want to talk about some of the songs?
Yeah. Let me think. Boneface.
I think it opens really strong. I think that is, more melodic and catchy song than, I could sing along to at least some bars of it in the way that you really can't in the more abstract second half.
Uh-huh.
I love to read along with my lyrics and think of them as poetry, which, I was confronting you with a lot of very specific passages from
I'd like for you to try me out on this too.
Well, because this is a lot more just kind of like poetic mumbo jumbo word salad. So that too seems like something that really sets their voices apart, as distinctive as is it Noah Panda Bear is doing the much more straightforward, very lyrically plain spoken stuff, but it's mixed so far down that it is almost regular words turn into abstraction. And then the other guy, Mr. Tear, please, Mr. Tear is my father. Call me Avi. I'm going to look up some of these lyrics now just because it'll be fun.
I love that it's Noah and Mr. Tear.
Yeah. A peace bone got found in the dinosaur wing. I've been jumping all over. My views are slowly shrinking. I was a jugular vein and a juggler's girl. I was supposedly leaking the most interesting colors. And so it's very evocative, but it's very like Ballad of a Thin Man to talk about somebody that we'll talk about in a few weeks.
Yeah, John Lennon does a lot of that shit too.
Yeah.
Just like cool things to say.
Well, that's why I thought that this would be a good pairing with Across the Universe, aside from the fact that weirdly it ends with them going to Strawberry Jam Studios in Across the Universe.
I know. Did you know that before? Or no?
I didn't. I just knew that the poster image was a strawberry.
Yeah,
so I was like,
I did not know that it was Strawberry Jam Studios.
But it's
wild.
I wondered whether there was any overlap with your fondness for this and your fondness for maybe
the Beatles?
Like late period, White Album stuff.
Interesting. Definitely within studio experimentation. Definitely they definitely love the Beatles. You can tell, I think. And their approach to songwriting reminds me a little bit of the Beatles. Especially with the two of their songwriting, the Noah and Dave's kind of minds and how they work together. Other than that, I mean, for the music that they were doing, they do a lot of like live drums on this record and like guitars and stuff, which is really cool, I think, and made it really dynamic live, which I think by the time I brought you to the show, I don't think there was many live instruments on stage. And so like, I think that reminds me of our conversations we had about Justice. I think it just kind of like takes away from it a little bit when, and like seeing, or maybe we talked about seeing Noah play Person Pitch live by himself, like that whole like standing in front of a laptop and like pressing play and then singing, like it just doesn't have the same thing as I think when you're watching people interact with real instruments. So that was another reason why, I like that live show, but also I think I like that about this record too.
So how have they developed from here? Because I know you've talked a bunch about the jump from this to Merryweather, but where are they at today?
Man, this was a while ago, and they've had a consistent output, but I think we're talking about, in my opinion, we're talking about like a period from kind of the get-go with Animal Collective. I mean, kind of like Sung Tongs and Feels, where like this freak folk acoustic craziness, experimental, amazing band, right? And it kind of were like these creatures around a campfire. And then this was like more of this like abrasive, loud, electronic textures and with live instruments, and just, yeah, it was a completely new direction. And then, with Person Pitch and using more samples and more like, I think with Merryweather, then in my opinion, that's like kind of the peak, right? These years of Person Pitch, Strawberry Jam, Merryweather, Fall Be Kind. And then from there, I think they, instead of going somewhere brand new, which I'm guessing they would argue they do each time, and I would be silly to say they don't, but maybe it's less of like a monumental seismic shift, and they've been a little bit more playful, I think, since Merryweather. Like a lot of their humor has returned, I'd say, and it's like kind of like certain songs can sound like a dark carnival, I'd say, more so than on their new stuff have that vibe, I would say, than their old stuff. They're very joyful, which you can say about this record. I think it is joyful, but I think that it's there's a lot of tension on this record, and there is on all their records, but I'd say maybe it gets more joyful. Yeah. But definitely I would say if there's one other place to go, it's what happens next, and you've already heard Person Pitch, but if you check out Merryweather and Fall Be Kind specifically, I think you'll see that they go somewhere even brand new, and And it's Merriweather is kind of like Strawberry Jam if it like was like drifting to sleep or something, like underwater and like mellower, you know, like it's way more like relaxing. And this record is not. I don't think. I think
it's
this record's
not. It's very stressful.
It's like war.
Yep.
Yeah, it's like it's a lot.
There were a couple of times that I tried to kind of like make a go at it in the past week or two and kind of bounced off it. Even though I liked the first track a lot, it's like it's a lot.
Sure, I think that was a single. It must have been. And I'm you probably like Chores. You liked Panda Bear enough to like Chores, and then you like the last song.
I love doing Chores. No, I like the whole first half a lot, and then it's Number One and Cuckoo Cuckoo that I fall off a little bit.
Got it. Yeah.
Have they been used in like movies or media at all? Or is it just too abstract?
I mean, that song "My Girls" from their next record was everywhere.
Was it? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in a way where like probably commercials, probably it was just felt like it was everywhere. So I think that was the biggest song they ever had, and that's kind of reads as a Noah song to me. He's kind of just singing about, you know, what he wants in life, and sounds like very Panda Bear, that song. So, but yeah, no, I don't know. I'm not sure how. The thing is also about Merriweather, and this is like a very indie scope we're talking about here. We're not talking about like the popularity such as Bieber's or Grande's or Beatles or whatever. But I think of Strawberry Jam as like they were always like pitchfork darlings, always indie critical darlings. And then with Merriweather, the next record, they kind of opened up into a little bit more of a a festival landscape, headlining landscape, outdoor big shows, and we're less of like a Boston club band going to see them there. Not that they lived in Boston, but like that's where I would see them. And then the next year it's like, oh, Coachella, you know? So I think this is also special because it's like you see it coming, but that they're still working their way to that like kind of accessibility. So it's almost like I cherish before they get more accessible, you know, to be like, oh, that's when the rawness and there's more tension and it's more human and it's more scary and it's like, yeah, like that's why I love this record. I might say this is my favorite Animal Collective record.
Well, that's a big deal. The best record by one of the best bands that's ever done.
Yeah.
What does it mean to be a collective? Because they are not the only collective that we have talked about.
Well, to Animal Collective, it means that like it's like calling a marriage a partnership and not getting, you know, or like it's like they don't want to put any pre-existing pressures on what it is to be a band. Like they don't want it to be like a contractual, we're always going to be the band, guys. They're a collective of the four of them, but they have made records, two of them and three of them quite often. So that's what they mean by it. It's like, no, it's not like, oh, dude, is he still in the band? It's like, no, he's always part of Animal Collective, even though we haven't made a record with him for 3 records or, you know, and it just kind of and they say they do it like project by project. Like, hey, I've got new songs. I want to do something. Like, what does your guys' year look like? Like, oh, I was kind of, you know, burnt out from last year. Like, I think I'm going to take the year off, you know, like that. I think that's where it's like a little freeing.
But then other people will cycle in who, you know, if somebody's unavailable or whatever.
I don't know.
No? Okay.
I don't think so. I think it's like there are 4 people in the collective. And you'll see any number of them perform live or on their records.
Do you want to talk any more about this record? It seems like we hit it.
No, yeah. I mean, to go listen to it if you haven't listened to it, listeners. It's and tell me what you think in the comments. Like and subscribe.
Do you want to do a quiz?
Uh-huh.
All right. So I was just so impressed with how you sort of deduced your way through the MTV Movie Awards that I am going to now see if you can deduce your way through the winners of the 2007 MTV VMAs.
Perfect.
Or at least a few of the categories. So I'm curious if you can guess who The VMAs were held in September of 2007, and they covered everything from June of 06 to June of 07. So that's what we're talking about here. And you need to tell me who let's say, best group. Who was the best group of 2007? Was it Gym Class Heroes, Linkin Park, Maroon 5, Fall Out Boy, or the White Stripes? Those are your nominees. The best group.
And you're saying it more has to do with their output in 2006? Because I know White Stripes was 2007, was Icky Thump.
It's 06 into 07. So sure. first half of the year.
That's a really, really, really hard one. I could definitely see White Stripes win it. They're eccentric. They're cool looking. MTV supports them. Give it to me again. One more time.
Gym Class Heroes.
No.
What?
No.
What? No.
I'm just saying. I'm crossing them off in my head.
Oh, I see.
Linkin Park.
Linkin Park. Yep.
Can I phone a phone and see what your hybrid theory was?
Sure. Phone a phone.
Was that 06?
Here, I'll phone your phone
so that people know that I'm not cheating.
Yes. Hybrid theory came out in 2000.
Oh, then no, not that.
Year 2000. Maroon 5?
No.
Fall Out Boy?
I'm going to go White Stripes.
It was Fall Out Boy.
No!
I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
So now the show's over.
Well, no, I'm actually kind of happy about that because it shows that I don't know Fall Out Boy as well as some others. Because I'm like I love their first record and I love Panic's second record, but like that was kind of when punk was over for me. So I would not have known anything Fall Out Boy was doing in 2007.
Well, I'm so sorry to hear that punk was over.
Next.
Who was the best new artist? It could have been Lily Allen, Peter, Bjorn, and John. I don't know who that is.
Yes, you do.
Right.
Yes, you do.
Fine. Gym Class.
Pumped Up Clicks.
Oh, okay. I do know that. Yeah. Gym Class Heroes, Carrie Underwood, or Amy Winehouse.
Amy Winehouse.
Wrong. It was the band Gym Class Heroes.
You're kidding.
Gym Class Heroes.
I like this joke. No, I like this joke. That's not true. Amy won, right?
Best new artist. It was Gym Class Heroes. Amy Winehouse was only nominated.
All right, I'm 0 for 2 on this quiz. I'm not going to be able to buy myself something on eBay this week.
That's too bad. Quadruple threat of the year. It was Beyonce.
What does that mean?
You can do 4 things, I guess.
What?
Beyonce.
Does it describe what for?
Bono.
That's really important.
No, I'm just plowing through. Beyonce, Bono, Jay-Z, Kanye West, or Justin Timberlake. They can all do 4 things.
The best quadruple threat?
Who's the best at doing 4 things?
Okay, but it's like if you're like a professional swimmer, a professional farmer, and terrible at everything else, right? You only have those 2.
You're
or
a
if
double
you're like
threat.
If you're like an average videographer, like a middle school teacher. You know what I mean? Like you do 4 things okay.
I'm just thinking about this teacher. It's nice that they have a secondary passion. They're not very good at it, but that's okay because they've got their primary teaching job.
How each of these artists is a quadruple threat.
Beyonce, singer. She's
leader.
a singer.
She sings good, really good. She is a leader and a role model to young people, and she does that good. She's good at it. Then she also acts in Austin Powers 3. She's
and
good.
Lion King
and the Lion King
the second one
and a half.
The second Lion King
Lion
one.
King 1.5.
She was not in the Lion King 1.5.
She was in the second Lion King one.
Yes.
And then Beyonce's also a mother.
And a filmmaker.
Okay. Kanye West, quadruple threat. Easy. rapper, fashion icon, god. That's
a really good one.
And farmer. Or
do Bono.
No, you do Bono.
Sunglasses. On a bus and across the universe.
Yeah, he's in Across the Universe.
There was that time he was kind of the devil on stage for a while, I think, and wrote Spider-Man.
He didn't write. That's confusing to our listeners.
He wrote Spider-Man Turn Off the Dark, the Julie Taymor musical. So this is all coming together. And then Justin Timberlake.
He can be bald. He can have the hair with the stringies.
Dick in a box.
Dick in a box. Or he can have the curly Q.
That's right.
I'd say it's him.
You're right. He won. You want to do one more?
Categories? Yeah, of course I do. This might be my favorite part.
Most earth-shattering collaboration.
Linkin Park and Jay-Z.
Not on the list. Akon and Eminem for Smack That.
Shattering. I wonder why that's shattering.
Gwen Stefani and Akon.
If anyone can manage to work with Akon, it's shattering.
It shatters the earth. They collaborated on The Sweet Escape. Justin Timberlake and Timbaland for Sexy Back.
Oh, interesting. I mean, that's a collaboration that changed his career. But then again, I feel like maybe you worked with Timbaland on the first one too, like Rock Your Body and Okay, that's interesting. Keep going.
Beyonce and Shakira for Beautiful Liar.
Ooh.
And Hold On to the Earth because it's going to shatter. U2 and Green Day for The Saints Are Coming.
I want to say Beyonce and Shakira. I mean, I think that's the coolest one, but I think it's got to be the year of Justin. When did Future Sex Love Sound? It must have been 2006. It's going to be Justin and Timbaland.
You should have just stopped because it was Beyonce and Shakira.
That's good. I hope they're still friends.
That's good. Because I think I'm trying to find the statistic here. Yeah, Timberlake and Beyonce were tied for the most nominations, but he won the most awards. So you're right. It was the year of him, and it was hosted by none.
It was hosted by a nun?
Nope. It just says on Wikipedia, hosted by none.
Which nun?
The flying nun, Sally Field. No. None, like no people.
Like none of the people.
All right, so that was not your strongest showing, but that's good because it shows the listeners that you are in fact human.
I don't know anything about music. That music's not my strength.
That's right. Well, that's tough for you. This season of What a Year is brought to you by Mubi, which is, I know I say it every episode, but it is just true. They are my absolute favorite streaming service. And I know how tempting it is to skip ahead a little bit in a podcast ad. And I know I always harp on you for it, but I hope you do keep listening because I'm not just telling you about Mubi. I get to talk about this amazing project that they did this summer. So, stick around. But first things first, if you have never heard of Mubi, or even if you have and you just like thinking about how cool this streaming service is, they are a curated streaming service that shows exceptional films from around the globe. They premiere a new film every day. It could be something from an iconic director or an emerging auteur, but either way, you're going to get a little email every day describing some fascinating movie. Could be like a classic foreign art house thing or something like Southland Tales. That was a fun day. And it's never just generated by an algorithm. It's something that is handpicked by people who love movies as much as you do. So, as they like to say, with Mubi, you get your own personal film festival streaming anytime, anywhere. movie, but I mentioned their amazing summer project, and that is the second season of their acclaimed audio documentary series Movie Podcast, which just wrapped up, and it told the surprising stories of individual movie theaters that had an impact on film history or just history in general. And I am honestly kind of devastated that it's over. And the finale is just such a perfect coda. And this is me off script. These are not the talking points. I just love talking about this show. So the finale is the story of the movie-going culture of Zanzibar, which then transitions into this story of an underground film screening series that's based out of Amsterdam. And the whole thing just so perfectly sums up this whole season-long project, and it becomes a testament to the fact that as long as there are machines that are designed to project movies, there's going to be people who want to gather and share that experience together. And no matter how desperate the state of movie theaters has seemed in the last couple of years, there is a spirit to this whole beautiful enterprise that's going to transcend whatever the industrial fortunes have in store. And that's what this episode really beautifully brings together. And it's a lovely, bittersweet note to end a podcast ad on, I guess. But before I wrap up, I do get to tell you that listeners to What a Year can try Mubi for free for 30 days at Mubi.com/whatayear. That's MUBI.com/whatayear. You're going to get a whole month of great cinema for free. And really, what could be better than that? You can't think of anything, can you? Nope, you can't, because it's impossible. And with that, let's get back to the show. All right, let's talk about the best movie ever made with the Beatles.
Yeah.
It's called
Get Back.
Across the Universe. And it was written and directed by Julie Taymor in the year 2007.
That's the guy that's the dad from Arrested, right?
No. That's the extremely canceled Jeffrey Tambor.
Got it.
Which is going to be the name of his memoir. No, Julie Taymor apparently just really loves the Beatles and really loves the 60s and has all these personal connections and said, I'm going to...
She loves the Beatles in the 60s, for sure.
That's right.
Definitely.
It would be my argument that this movie is baffling. But not baffling enough to be baffling. We were saying earlier that it's weird that it isn't weirder. And it's baffling that it isn't more baffling. And this is a movie that I have a perverse fondness for because it is trying more things than most movies. But I think it's not trying enough things.
You love films that take chances. You always have.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this would fit in that category for sure. I mean, the ambition that comes along with a project like this and the amount of like needing to clear the publishing rights and just to make a Beatles musical movie is a huge project. And so for me, this movie is the most. I remember maybe this movie more than most of the ones on the list from this year. Like, you remember when I was saying like, oh yeah, I watched Hot Rod in 2007, but it didn't stick with me as much, and I know it better because I've watched it since. Whereas this movie, I only have seen in 2007 and then this week.
Same.
And I remember when the trailer came out, I don't think I had ever been excited for a movie more than I was for this ever in my life. Like the trailer starts out and it's like, is there anybody going to listen to my story? And then it like kind of like wisps away, and like all the psychedelic imagery and the visuals and it was what they showed you in the trailer, that at the center of it was this gorgeous boy and this girl who fall in love, and you're like, oh, and then it's like all you need is love, and it's like, oh, this is going to be a story about love, and there's going to be some like, you know, it's going to be ensemble cast. It kind of reminded me like, oh, maybe it might be like kind of like Rent in the way that it's like ensemble cast like that, like they back each other up on certain parts. But I don't think it was really ensemble at all. I thought it was terribly written in terms of who sings what, how they sing it. And then there's no story. There's literally no story. Like try to tell me the story. What is this film about? A guy, give me a summary. And then tell me how that's appealing at all.
Well, the summary of this movie is that a guy named Jude goes from England to America in search of his dad, finds him immediately, and moves on. And falls in with a dude named Max and his sister Lucy. And they head off to New York City to seek their fortune in the world. And
by the way, I'm still on board by this point.
Yeah, and they do
I
very
think
quickly.
The first half hour of this film is amazing. Like, I think because you're like, oh, he's going to meet the girl and their romance is going to be great. Like, there's more here, right? And then it's just the fact that like an hour after that, you're like, where is it? Like, where is any sense of something to hold on to? Like, except just vapid exposition to fit these songs that don't even really still fit after you've done all this vapid expedition to get there. There's, like, and why do I want these two people to be together? Like, Evan Rachel Wood is zero character. Jude is not a character. Well, sorry.
No, I mean, none of them are characters. And
I'm passionate about how bummed I was that year in 2007. I was so bummed. Because I wanted it to be good so bad.
And I can't decide if there's no reason it shouldn't have been good or if it's impossible for it to have been good. Is there a good version of this, or is this as good as it's going to get? Because what she was trying to do is work backwards from the songs. And so the characters can't really be characters because everything has to just be driven by matching up enough to the lyrics of certain songs for it to have some kind of through line. So you can't have Jude actually have particularly significant or idiosyncratic wants and needs because it's all going to have to serve some song that you've placed here.
Yeah. Yeah. Like in a musical, you go through the biggest points of the journey through song. Mm-hmm. But if the song isn't saying anything about your story and you're just singing, and it's like kind of a fit, and you're trying to bring that amount of emotional depth to it, I just don't think it. Yeah, how do you succeed?
Well, one thing that she made this interesting choice to really attach a lot of significance to the names of certain characters or certain figures from these songs. So ABBA, it works because all you need to make fit are, you can dance having the time of your life, you're the dancing queen, which you can pretty much apply to any situation you care to. With this, they were like, well, we gotta have Dear Prudence. So we gotta have a character named Prudence, and we got to arrange it so that she is gonna at some point need to come out in two different ways. I didn't think about that. In play, yeah.
I guess.
And we know that we've got a character named Jude, and so we already know that the end of this movie is probably going to be about getting him all bucked up with Hey Jude. And so the fact that she picked the most specific Beatles songs sort of screwed her over in the ability to make it a Mamma Mia, I think.
I wanted to... He's an artist, right? And like his main... Like, can we talk about like rising action? Can we talk about climax? Can we talk about like this movie's structure and form? And really, like, when you put it out on paper, is it that he just like, there's so much to get behind. There are so many things in this man's world. Friends that are getting hurt, friends that are getting shipped off to war, people who, his girlfriend is politically active. And he just throws a tantrum because he's an artist and he feels like he has nothing to believe in. And then at the end, just like takes a vacation back home for like a scene, but then goes back to London and sings All You Need Is Love. And then it ends.
Back to New York, not London.
Oh yeah. Sorry. Back to New York. So can you, did I miss something there? Like, am I being too hard on it? Like, where is the meat of the story? Like, where did it feel like something something substantial at all to you besides the beginning?
Well, it doesn't necessarily. The story has to be the story of the 60s, which is what is if you can't have, I think you kind of can't have the story be about the characters, because the characters have to be kind of paper people who are in service of the songs.
Yeah.
The real story is the story of the 60s, and I think it is too rushed and too glossy and too let's cram everything in, but also have it be really well lit and colorful, and even the sort of scary stuff is not that scary. The civil unrest is not going to be all that intense. It's a little bit sort of
a little child dies.
You're right.
Let it be.
I was not thinking about the Detroit riots in the beginning.
That part was crazy.
Yes, that is very intense. I was thinking more about the later stuff in New York when Jude is becoming all alienated. It's a little bit Forrest Gump. It's a little bit like that miniseries The 60s that was on NBC in like 1999.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the way that Jude falls apart as a character. It really falls apart once they all get on Ken Kesey, played by Bono's bus, and head off into the counterculture. And that's when the story as a story really does fly off the rails.
It heard he'd lost me by then. Dear Prudence was when it lost me, which was a couple scenes before that.
Yeah.
When it lost you.
Yeah.
Where I was just like, you're wasting my time.
Well, you're not, because you're giving us fodder for a #1 podcast episode that's going to top all the charts.
Please like, share, and subscribe.
Remember to rate and review.
Please rate, review, and subscribe.
And remember to subscribe. So I like this movie because I like movies that are completely singular and there's nothing else like them. And that applies to this one. That is the only closing argument, and if I'm even closing it, that is the only real argument I can mount for this thing, which is that I think it's really special that they tried, and I think it's special that they got as close as they did on a task that I think is probably impossible. I also came up with the idea for this movie when I was 12. I don't think I mentioned that.
No, you didn't. It's a good idea.
I was about 12, and I just had this idea in my head for what if you did a musical that was only using the Beatles songs and Come Together. I thought would be really good for like a fight scene, and that was as far as I got. And then Julie Taymor stole it from me.
Yeah, and I think you would have done better personally.
When I was 12, I probably would have.
Which ones did you like, and which ones were memorable? Let's say, which ones did you? Because there were some like I feel like I've just seen a face. In the bowling alley, like the Lebowski.
That's the highlight of the movie, I think.
Is there anybody going to list all the Quadrophenia Beach, like Brighton shit?
Sure.
I liked a lot. I liked how Liverpool was filmed. I like his Scouse accent. Like I think he actually sounds convincingly Scouse, which I'm stoked on. What
is that? I don't know that term.
Scouser's like Liverpudlian accent.
All right.
Sich, balls, tops. Chicken and Ganagog. I'm a big Liverpool soccer fan, football. So that's why I know. I watch a lot of people, listen to a lot of people speaking in this accent all day. So this guy did good, and he's not even Scouse. And so did the rest of the Liverpool cast too, I felt. And it was fun being in like the 60s. Some of the shots like I felt like were really convincing and made me even more angry. Like all the costume design was so good. And until we got to the psychedelic stuff, when it was like more in the real world, like I was buying it. Like even, I forget, was it even through like probably the first war number, I was still like on board.
You mean She's So Heavy when they're marching through the jungle carrying the Statue of Liberty?
Yeah, I was still on board even through that.
Yeah.
But now
I find
back,
that all compelling.
Yeah. I mean, and then it just felt like some numbers were for absolutely nothing. But I liked the production on some of it, and then really didn't on others. So I felt like kind of inconsistently produced. I thought, and I liked the last part, I guess, the rooftop thing. I don't know why, but just like seeing them be able to play on that rooftop, and
it really worked for me too.
Yeah, that was like I was like, oh, okay, like it's like payoff. kind of. And last thing I want to say, before I give you the chance to tell me which numbers stood out to you, is I don't know if I've ever thought that Evan Rachel Wood has been convincing in either of the projects that I've seen her in. This and Westworld, and that's it. End of list. I never saw 13. And then Deadwood, is that the other one?
Oh, I don't know. I've seen her in stuff over the years. Nothing that has significantly stood out to me.
Because I thought he was charismatic in this.
Jim Sturgis, yeah.
Even though eventually his character becomes not lovable, I think from the get you want to love this character.
Yeah.
I mean, and I felt with her that was a little bit more challenging.
I am really hung up on you mentioning Rent, because I think that is probably the template they were trying to pull from. And I think one thing that really makes things fall apart in the second half is trying to create any sort of intrigue with the relationship between Prudence, who is standing in for, is she sort of a Janis Joplin figure, perhaps, and the character is
that's not Prudence.
No, not Prudence. Sadie.
It's not Sadie.
Sadie, yeah.
Sexy Sadie.
Yeah. And Jojo, who is becoming Jimi Hendrix. That all just pulls away from everything for me and seems to take place in another universe entirely at a certain point.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense to me.
So they're trying to do too much and serve too many things, and Rent would also be a terrible movie right around this same time, and so I think they're an interesting comparison point.
I don't think Rent is as terrible as this.
Well, Rent has a better source material. It just, as a movie, looks similarly like too bright and too glossy. And
that's interesting that you think this looks too bright and too glossy, because I think they did more so than other projects in 2007 make it look vintage to a certain extent. And I'm talking about the real scenes, not the stupid. Who's the guy who sings Mr. Kite?
Eddie Izzard.
Eddie Izzard.
Yes.
Oh man. And then that's like right after that is like the Bono number, or they're like near each other, and
Bono's
like,
right
it's just
before,
becoming this like cameo party, and you're just like, geez, man, like this is playing out like who's in my personal roller deck type of vibe.
I did like the paper mache blue meanies in the Mr. Kite scene.
I know you did.
That made me happy. As a fan of that weird movie, Yellow Submarine. Should have been more Yellow Submarine in this movie. Maybe the sequel, which she is threatening to make, set in the 70s.
I mean, there might be an argument for trying to do it, trying to make a new story. And it would be about like me like turning into an octopus, and my friends are piggies, and I go visit them, and then there's something in the way that she moves,
I think there's a lot of potential there, and I think it's worth exploring.
Because Mean Mr. Mustard Seed is my father, and he wants to kill me with a silver hammer that belongs to his friend Max. Well. And then Strawberry Fields is where I go grow my strawberries, of course, when I'm not an octopus, because I also turn into a man. Do you like this?
I do, and I'm going to cut it out of the episode because we don't want Julie Taymor to hear this and steal it like she stole my idea when I was 12 to have a fight scene to come together and also have some other stuff.
They didn't have a fight scene to come together.
Well, I know, because she
just walked.
Yeah, she didn't have the wisdom to steal my entire idea.
Yeah. Well, we'll work it into my octopus one. You know what it's going to be called?
What?
Octopus 2.
Octopus 2: Across the Universe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm glad you're on board. I'll come up with a pitch deck.
All right.
I'll send it your way.
So why is this going in the time capsule? Why did we do this? Because we both agreed we wanted to do this.
Yeah, well, I wanted to see it again and see if I was too hard on it. And for the first half hour, I was so stoked because I thought that was the case. Because I was like, "Oh my god, this is so sick!" I was too hard on it, and then by the end of it, it was just like mad. And then felt like it was tear jerking me at the very last scene. I was like, you're not going to get a tear from me. Like, you don't deserve it. Like,
I mean, a lot of it just comes down to these damn songs. I mean, you've got the production value of just, I remember what it was for me is it's just the moment that gets me in any version of Hey Jude ever is just the exclamation at the end, the Hey Judy, Judy, Judy. It's impossible for me to hear that and not want to cry. And so when you actually have characters who are applying that to a narrative arc, you're going to get me.
Were there any other ones that you remember liking or really disliking?
What, Numbers?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I've just seen a face is where I think, like I was saying, this movie really works well. And maybe, I don't know, they try to roughly organize the chronology of the songs they're using, right?
Oh God, did they?
Do they? I mean,
I guess they kind of do.
So I wonder if the earlier songs,
oh God,
just, I mean, it's that same simple thing that I was saying, like the ABBA songs are simple and so they can be applied well to something. The same with I Want to Hold Your Hand, and the same with these early songs are just such simple concepts that the rest of the stuff can sort of gel a little better.
I appreciated when they tried a little bit to make it like, you know, when I mentioned that, is there anybody who's going to listen to this story part where they'd take little parts and he would kind of sing a cappella and they'd put like ambient stuff below him, or it was like very like pondering, like, like, gosh, I forget, like even Because kind of worked. Just like anything where it was like, I don't know, more performance based and was something new than just the song, especially not in stupid production tricks, which they do in this movie, but like in arrangement, you know, when it's like, oh, dang, just listen to him just sing that melody, you know, or like, and his voice is so good. I think. Yeah. I love it. And he almost sounds like way more Scouse than the Beatles, like way more conversational. Like you can hear his accent way more when he sings. But it's really powerful, and I think he is by far the best part of the film for me.
Well, I read an interview with I think it was just with Julie Taymor, where they were talking about the Beatles sort of hooks and the Beatles riffs being the ghost in the room, that they knew you were going to be hearing the ghost of the guitar, even if they left it out of there. And so that is probably some of what you're responding to with the rearrangements. There aren't a lot that jump out to me aside from I've Just Seen a Face. And partially I just think his performance in that is so electric, and it's very sort of simple musical sort of, it looks like something out of, I don't know, some classic MGM musical.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, Princeton looked nice. Yeah, and then Liverpool. I mean, that was so fun. Seeing the docks, seeing the streets, like just filmed really well. And people in like 60s period piece clothing, like, sure, any day. Hit me. You want to go film that and show me that? You got it. I want to see it.
Great. So any aspiring filmmakers, you got financial backing here.
No.
You're not going to commission a movie?
No. I'm just saying there's an audience for it. I am not offering any financial backing to any independent filmmakers. Never again. Not again.
He's winking, everybody. He's winking, and that means do it.
Just sign my name.
This movie does feel somehow very locked into 2007 for me, and maybe it's just because you can't really compare it to much of anything. It's a movie that for some reason had to emerge at this point, and so I think
we wiped it out. Nobody talks about it. Like,
well,
I feel like it's not talked well. It's not talked about well. It's not talked about in a good light.
Well, I think it is valuable to have a little bit of a fiasco in there, for one thing, as I continue trying to justify this as being included in the canon.
Has she had a big win yet? Julie Taymor? Jeffrey?
Well, I mean,
Delpy?
Her greatest successes have been on stage. She created the Lion King Broadway play.
Oh yeah, that's a win.
That's a huge win. It's maybe
I never saw it, but
biggest win in Broadway history. One of the biggest.
Oh, is it really?
It's one of the biggest. I think it's maybe the longest running show or something like that.
And she wrote like she adapted the movie into the same story, but did it for stage.
Well, she
just like wrote.
She conceived how to do it with puppetry and the whole design of that thing, which I've never seen it either, but I'd like to.
Oh, maybe I have seen it. Huh. Okay, cool. So she started off with a huge win.
Yeah, and then she's done a few other movies. Frida, the Frida Kahlo biopic. Titus was a Shakespeare adaptation with Anthony Hopkins. She did The Tempest, where Helen Mirren played the lead role, which is typically a male role, and so that was interesting. And then she did a Gloria Steinem biopic that was at Sundance 2 years ago, and everyone absolutely hated. So, should we throw this thing in the time capsule?
Yeah, why not?
I'm so excited to welcome to the podcast Hannah Bonner, who is a poet whose work has appeared or is forthcoming in Asheville Poetry Review, Pigeon Pages, Schlag, So to Speak, the North Carolina Literary Review, the Pinch Journal, the Vassar Review, Tinderbox Poetry Journal, Tri-Quarterly, and Two Peach. And her essays have been published in Brightwall Darkroom, Bustle, the Little Patuxent Review, and Vita, Women in the Literary Arts. Pardon me if I stumbled over any of those. She has an MA in Film Studies and is currently an MFA candidate in Creative Nonfiction at the University of Iowa. And she has nominated for our little time capsule the collection Something Bright Then Holes by the poet and multi-hyphenate writer Maggie Nelson. Hannah, thank you so much for doing this. Welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here, Ethan. Thank you so much for inviting me.
So just to get started, I always like to ask sort of where were you in 2007? Because that is the subject of this show. What is your association with that year, if anything?
Yeah, I was thinking about that when you invited me to come on and was wondering like what was particular about that year. The spring of 2007, so, however many years ago at this time, I was finishing up my first year of college at UNC Chapel Hill, and I was an English major, and I knew I wanted to minor in creative writing. My background is in poetry, and I felt really sure about both of those paths. And that semester, I had to take a required English class. It was required of all first years at UNC Chapel Hill. But for this particular one, the teacher that I had a real emphasis on film in the class. And in a lot of ways, that class changed the trajectory of my life. It made me realize that I was interested in a kind of hybrid writing that wasn't just poetry, and it wasn't just writing papers and analyzing books for my English classes, that I was really interested in visual media as well. And I don't know if my life would have been the same if I hadn't had that class. I wrote a paper on 8.5. And I think I realized then that I wanted to go to grad school for film.
Wow. As early as your first year of undergrad, you had your grad school plan. I wish I had anything like that kind of clarity.
Yeah, it was an incredible class. And I had a lot of freedom about the film that I got to pick. And, I don't know what it says about me at 19. I wanted to write about Fellini's 8.5, but I was really psyched to do it.
Well, you were on the right track, I think, because that is, to speak a little bit about your work, the poetry that you bring to analysis is something that I do really admire. So
thank you.
So then to turn to Something Bright Then Holes, this collection by Maggie Nelson from 2007 that was reissued in 2017. And this lovely reissue that I know I'm holding here, and I think you are too.
Yeah.
How was it that you discovered this collection, and sort of what were your first impressions, if you remember?
Yeah, this was also something I was kind of mulling over because Maggie Nelson has been such an influential figure to me in the writing that I've done for the past several years. But I think I came to her in 2016 when The Argonauts was published. And I think that was when a lot of people were first introduced to her, even though she had been writing for years before that. It's this really incredible hybrid memoir that she wrote about being pregnant with her son and also her partner, their story, and his transitioning while they're together. And at the time, I was in my first year of graduate school, getting my master's in film studies at the University of Iowa. And it was another kind of light bulb moment for me of realizing that there was a way to write critically that I had never really seen before, in a way that just really, really excited me and felt kind of urgent and propulsive. And then I just backtracked and read everything that she had written. I haven't yet read On Freedom, her most recent book, which came out last year. But I've read everything else, all her poetry, her first book on the New York School, which I think was her thesis in graduate school. And I remember reading Something Bright Then Holes, and it did something that where I felt like I hadn't really seen poetry do before, which was it's intensely lyrical. Her writing really reminds me a lot of Sylvia Plath. I feel like you can see a lot of influence there. But it's also just so quotidian, and there's something about it that feels so cold from just everyday life in a way that I love the kind of juxtaposition that she brings of those two things. And I'm really fascinated at the way in which she's always kind of playing between different registers tonally or in terms of images. I just think she's a fascinating and incredible writer.
So you mentioned the New York School. That's a term that I saw come up in an interview with her, and she seemed to indicate that's the tradition that this collection falls within. Can you talk a little bit about that term? Because it's not something I had seen before.
Sure, and I should have brushed up on it before this podcast. But there's a level, I think, of confessionalism in those poets, which I think you certainly see in this collection, where it's a collection that's deeply rooted in a place and a location, and there are kind of recurring images or bodies of water or street corners or apartments in this collection. But it's also about a breakup. And also about a former teacher of hers who is in a pretty catastrophic accident and needs her to be cared for. And so I think that is kind of one distinctive feature of the New York School. As far as, again, memory serves me, it's been a while since I've read that book. But I think Maggie Nelson is kind of deeply wedded to that tradition in her writing, both critical and poetic.
Sure. She, in this interview I read, described it as the I do this, I do that type of book. Mm-hmm. That is the New York School type.
Yeah. Yeah, very for foregrounding the I, the first person. And I think you could say there's an element of it that can seem diaristic, but I think it would do a disservice to the power of her writing and the lines in her work to just write it off as diaristic. I think that's a formal strategy she's using to get at bigger issues that have to deal with freedom, the body, sex, things like that.
So one of them in particular, so this is in 3 sections, and the first one in particular, or the first sort of proper section, the Canal Diaries, is, as the title says, very diaristic. So it does, I mean, that is a section that it appealed to me in the sort of the diary aspect, gave me a form that I could latch on to, because I don't have a lot of experience kind of analyzing poetry, and it just sort of is something that it's the art form that just sort of hits me most on the gut level, and not with any ability to kind of sort of assess why that is for me. And I kind of value that about the form, that I, can just experience it on such a visceral level like that. But I did like the sort of through line that gave me through that section.
I think it creates just such an intimacy with the reader to frame it in that way. And then also, I was really struck rereading this book, and I read it a couple times before our conversation. But in doing so, you also start to get familiar with this cast of characters that she keeps referring to throughout. And so it creates a kind of underlying sense of trust with the reader, that maybe she doesn't need to explain who the man in black is to us. But as we start to see him in poem after poem, we just become really familiar with this landscape that she is painting for us throughout the collection. And I like that sense of feeling like I'm being kind of pulled into a world that she's making for me as the reader.
Yes, and the first 2 sections do have such a specific place and setting to them. The second section, which is called The Hospital for Special Care, is the relatively shorter section, although it is dominated by this one multi-page stanza that is very specifically set in, as you mentioned, the hospital where her mentor, Christina Crosby, I read, who went on to write her own book about her accident called A Body Undone, is being cared for. And then the third section doesn't have that sort of grounding to it as much, but does feel like it sort of picks up on the themes that have now accrued across the prior 2 sections. So do you see sort of, if it is this tripartite, I don't know if that's the right term, this triptych thing, do you see as there being any uniting thematic thread? I think you mentioned a couple of them, but what is this collection about to you?
I think this collection for me, there's that really gorgeous little poem she has that ends with live with your puny, vulnerable self, live with her. And I think the collection, when I read it, is so much about kind of the body as something that is vulnerable, prone to sickness, breakable, both physically and kind of emotionally, but also something that continues. And even in kind of spite of horrible tragedy, whether, having your jaw replaced by metal or undergoing terrible heartache. And so the collection in a lot of ways seems to me to kind of focus on a life that is lived. And again, the kind of small moments of sitting by the canal at like 1 a.m, or watching, like somebody from the bar window outside. And that gets juxtaposed next to these really larger issues of mortality, and what our lives mean when they don't work out in the ways in which we hope, desperately hope for them to. So
you had volunteered a couple of poems that you thought would be nice to be read. I was wondering if you would want to turn to one of those now. Maybe the first poem in the collection, Something Bright Then Holds.
Sure. This is maybe of all of the poems in this collection, my favorite. Something bright, then holes. I used to do this. The self I was used to do this. The selves I no longer am nor understand. Something bright, then holes, is how a girl newly sighted once described a hand. I reread your letters and remember correctly. You wanted to eat through me, then fall asleep with your tongue against an organ, quiet enough to hear it kick. Learn everything there is to know about loving someone, then walk away coolly. I am not ashamed. Love is large and monstrous. Never again will I be so blind, so ungenerous. Oh, bright snatches of flesh, blue and pink, then 4 dark furrows, 4 funnels, leading into an infinite ditch. The heart, too, is porous. I lost the water you poured into it.
Thank you. That one does include possibly my favorite line in the whole collection. Love is large and monstrous. Yes. It is. So it's such a plain spoken thing, but it just the way that it is sort of dropped in there in that spot really hits me. So why is it that that's the favorite one for you?
I mean, I think similarly, I'm always really struck by that line. I appreciate how Maggie Nelson can write about love and desire and companionship, but she always avoids the saccharine. And so she's able to write about these kind of extreme and common emotions that we all experience in a way. I love the word that you use. It's just very plain and kind of laid bare. But there's a level of drama to it that I think is true to the vagaries of like the human heart. And then the ways in which sometimes there is just this like almost operatic quality to her writing when she says, then fall asleep with your tongue against an organ, quiet enough to hear its kick. The way in which she's able to kind of take something that is not literal, but make it so deeply felt or embodied in the reader. I think, again, I just think she's incredible at depicting affect in the human body.
Yeah, the connections between the literal and the ephemeral are really impressive, the way she's able to shift from one then to the other, typically starting with something very literal and then kind of spiraling out from there into the sort of sublime is impressive.
Yeah, and I'm struck by how she does that from poem to poem too. In this one, she writes about bright snatches of flesh, blue and pink. And then just a few pages later, she's describing like factories as blue and pink. So I feel like from poem to poem, she's also oscillating from these descriptions that have to do with like her interior landscape, and then they get mapped onto the external landscape surrounding her, which is kind of broken down and urban, not like the pastoral, the beautiful that we would typically associate with poetry, but kind of ugly. And she switches back and forth between them so seamlessly, I think. And I really appreciate that there's this constant like interweaving between interior and exterior her work.
Well, and it's interesting. The Canal Diaries, it does have this very pastoral feel, but it is specifically about the Gowanus Canal. It has a lot of imagery in there about how it is diseased water, and that's an interesting clash and tension that I hadn't necessarily picked up on. Is there one of these sections that is sort of your favorite, or is it all just sort of mixed together into one work?
That's a great question. I think in some ways, the Canal Diaries is my favorite because it seems so specific to this place and to this location. But the Hospital for Special Care, I mean, every time I read it, there's just such tenderness in that section. Again, in a way that doesn't get sappy or kind of precious, but is just a really deep love for this woman who has meant so much to her in kind of a variety of registers, and how attentive she is in that section to depicting the different levels of care that are required for somebody who is in such a kind of precarious physical state. I just find it incredibly moving.
And then there is the last section, which is not quite as specifically organized around anything in the sort of way that the other two have their specific settings. Mm-hmm. And in here, there's another poem in that section that you had selected. So would you share that one with us?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. This one is called Mercurial. I have been warned against you. Mercurial, one friend says. And I wonder, is mercury a form of blue? When or where does silver break into blue? Or forget, if you can, about color. It's about how it moves. And I am quick, changeable, close to the sun, too.
I really love that one.
Me too, yeah.
As I mentioned, the sort of idea of things spiraling from just something that your friend said out until this very quickly, this sort of transcendent observation, and all of it coming down to just the very specific meaning of words, which is something I think a lot of us also who are drawn to this kind of work like to obsess over.
Absolutely. She does this a lot. She has another poetry collection called Jane, which is about, she's culling material from her aunt's diaries, who was murdered before Maggie Nelson was born. And I think she's just constantly kind of tonguing over language and etymology and archives. She's really caught up in the texture of language.
So something I noticed was sort of the variations in how the words are arranged on the page. And particularly, there are a couple of times where it just becomes this long multi-page stanza. So do you see anything in particular as being the effect of particularly the centerpiece Hospital for Special Care poem that goes on for about 5 pages, I think?
Yeah.
What the sort of cumulative impact is there?
Yeah, I do find that poem to be really effective in the way it's laid out on the page. And as you say, like just this multi-page continuous stanza. Because I think in some ways the formatting of that forces us to sit with this labor and this form of care, just as Maggie Nelson and Christina have to sit with it too. And to kind of walk us through like having to dip that very teeny tiny sponge into the water and constantly bring it to her mentor's lips to try to hydrate her, or like rubbing the lip balm on her chapped lips because she's constantly dehydrated. I think there's something about these longer lines and not having any stanza breaks that just really forces us to kind of sit with this experience. And again, we talked about intimacy and the kind of diaristic format of some of these poems. And I think in doing that and forcing us to kind of slow down with the line and the poem, she is bringing us into that intimate space. as well.
So is there anything that we haven't talked about yet from this collection that kind of jumps out at you? Because I think I've sort of hit the major things that I was going to bring up.
I mean, I think the through line throughout this that is not quite as foregrounded is this is also a book about a breakup.
I did forget to mention that, didn't I? Yeah, so much of it is addressed to the you.
Yeah. And it seems like a really great companion to her hybrid text Bluettes, which is also about a breakup and kind of addressing the absent you, and also about the color blue. She does this really kind of extensive research into that color and her obsession with it. And you see traces of that throughout this. She's really attentive to color and something bright than wholes. There's a lot about not just blue, but she talks about being kind of gagged by this like really bright green that she sees when she's, observing the canal and things like that. So if I, had to suggest like reading two of her books back to back, it would be those two, or obviously like Jane and the Red Parts as well.
Yeah, the sort of ghost that the you represents comes to feel very tangible, and even in the poems that aren't sort of so specifically addressed to the you, that absence is felt, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. And again, she always undercuts it with something kind of brutal or just true to kind of urban life, like the desk that's been abandoned on the canal banks that has like condoms that she describes as slugs attached to it. She finds the beauty in everything, but in places I think we wouldn't ordinarily think to look.
So I mentioned at the beginning that poetry is the art form that I have the least sort of language for and the least analytical facility with. So just before we wrap up, I was wondering if you can say sort of broad strokes, what is it about poetry that makes this an art form that you are gravitated towards?
I think poetry at its like best for me as both a reader and a writer says something that I've already felt or experienced or kind of known to be true, again, in a very deeply embodied way, but didn't feel or know yet that I had language for. And so there's the kind of shock or surprise of reading something that startles me awake or helps me see the world anew, or again, puts words in the right order in a way that lends light to experiences or emotions that I have or feel, but in a totally new and electrifying way.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for doing this. This has been fantastic. Thank you for bringing this collection into my life. I recommend that anybody go out and grab it. Seems to be pretty widely available. Is there anything that you'd like to sort of direct our attention to or put in a plug for?
I think I would just say if folks are interested in poetry but don't know where to start, literary magazines are always a great place to start. I love the Paris Review. They always have a variety of work. Poetry magazine, which has been around forever. And then I would just put a plug in. I'm the poetry editor for a literary magazine called Brink, based out of Iowa City. And that's something I'm always attentive to in my curation of the poets that we feature, is having a wide variety of voices for anyone looking to kind of learn about poetry.
All right, fantastic. Well, thank you again.
Thank you, Ethan.
What a Year is produced by me, Ethan Warren, with original music by my co-host Ryan Pollie. Thanks to Brian Rosemeyer for the mixing and mastering, and Shane Butler and the good folks at Portray Me for our artwork. Please take a few minutes to follow us on your podcasting app of choice, and while you're doing that, if you could leave us a rating and a quick review, it really does make a difference. You can find us on Twitter and Instagram at What a Year Pod. On our next episode, we will be talking about Bon Iver's For Emma Forever Ago and the assassination of Jesse James by the coward Robert Ford, plus Marvel Comics Civil War with guest Tyler Huckabee. It's going to be a good one.